Welcome, and thank you for joining us on another episode of today's Electrical Estimating. I'm your co-host, Chris Trommer, and we'll be shortly joined by our other co-host, Sal Huerta. So with season 2 coming to a close, me and Sal decided to look back at some past topics that we had discussed with our guests, ones that we thought had the most impact to what's going on today to our listeners, and ones that we sort of got the biggest response from. So today we're going to dive into tariffs. I know it's something you're hearing a lot about over the last 6 months. We've done a couple different episodes. We did a whole series with Keith, who is a 30-year economist. Most recently, we had Travis joining us from a distributor in the Northwest, and Barney, a contractor from the Seattle area. And we thought we would take those conversations along with our personal opinions and some research that we did and put it together for you. Hope you guys can pull something out of it. And, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but we appreciate you listening. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this is your first time joining us, please hit the subscribe button. We'll be dropping episodes for the next couple Fridays until we take a break from season 2. But this way you'll be aware when we come back for season 3. So hope all is well with you guys. Take care. One big conversation piece we've had over the last 2 weeks has been tariffs. And obviously, it's something that we've talked about a lot since January. We had Keith on and did a whole 6-part
series.
There we go. Thank you. I drew a blank on that one. But it was great because we talked about how tariffs work, what tariffs are, who's paying for them, how they're going to affect the industry. Fast forward, we were able to get some guests on here from a local distributor out West, and also a reoccurring guest with Barney. And they gave us sort of boots on the ground insights into how tariffs are affecting their businesses, the changes that they're seeing. I know that both of them had stated that they're only seeing, I guess, a little bit of an uptick in pricing. I mean, they didn't really state that they've seen large increases. I guess that's to be expected because the tariffs have been coming on. And then they've been paused, and then they've been coming on, and then they've been paused. So I guess we haven't really seen any full effect. I know one thing, as we talked about in the past, and was mentioned when we talked with Keith, was that some manufacturers actually brought over a good amount of product ahead of time and warehoused it in the United States before tariffs took part. And something I just saw online was about copper, was that a lot of people had gone and bought all this copper up because they wanted to get it in before any price increases. But now there hasn't been the same demand in construction. So there hasn't been a need for people to purchase such high quantities. So now these people that have purchased all this copper and brought it over are sitting on tons of product that they can't get rid of now.
Well, the interesting part, especially when it comes to commodities like that, the tariffs are sometimes they're placed on a country, and then sometimes in this particular case, they're put on a product. In this case, like you said, copper or steel. So with the tariff on that, even though you might have bought them, you probably were smart to buy in, because if you're sitting on it and the tariff is imposed, well, now you've made some money. But
yeah,
the reality is, if they start to target specific commodities like wire or stuff like that, that's when the pricing will be felt by the customer.
Yeah, I know. I'm reading something here that says the copper wiring prices have risen about 18% since January of 2025. So we have seen an increase. So it could be a smart move for them to be bringing it in because they've already paid the lower price. And then hopefully, they can sell it. It's not going to be as much of a hit when it goes downstream to end users like our contractor buddies. But, at the same time, you got to think prices increase, that they don't increase the price as well to sort of meet the current market price to make a little bit of a profit. We all hope that doesn't happen, but we're seeing prices here and there. It seems more on commodities from the conversations that we're having with distributors and contractors, that they're seeing more of the commodity pricing going up, like the copper or steel conduit, which has gone up about 14% in the last year. Even looking at electrical panels are now I'm seeing here is the cost is up 22% due to the combined steel and copper. So Is it more that we're seeing increases on the commodity products, things that are including a lot of copper or a lot of steel that are having to be made overseas and then shipped in? Or even if they're bringing the raw materials from overseas and bringing them here, you're still paying the tariff. Are we seeing that more on the commodity side than we are saying wiring devices or receptacles or lighting controls, things of that nature that might not be holding that much, copper or steel within them?
We've talked about this in the past, how one part of our industry actually does affect the other part. They're not siloed independently. So you can't look
Yeah.
at copper or steel as one group and then, components as another. They do affect each other. So once it trickles down, like you said, from the copper and the pricing and the tariffs associated with that, down to transformers, panels. That's the secondary part, that with those parts, I mean, those commodities are actually being turned into. That's when you're going to see the price increase on those as well. So it could be short, small right now, like you said, 18% growth increase right now, but when it gets to those other ones, the panels and so forth, that's when you see the prices much higher.
As I just mentioned, even if you're building the product in the United States, you're having to get your raw materials from outside the states. That's where you're getting hit with the tariff as well. Because a lot of people are like, well, if they're built in America, then they shouldn't be going up as much. But the instance that if you're still bringing product, uh, commodity product over to the US to make the product here, you're still importing things. And I mean, but I mean, on a side note, I guess something just popped up as we're talking that the Trump administration just extended the deadline for tariff deal with Mexico by another 90 days. And I mean, I think that's one of the biggest problems right now, I guess, that people are having. And even Barney mentioned it, is just that big uncertainty. You don't know if you should be bidding out and adding extra costs onto your products and materials because the tariffs are supposed to hit August 1st, but now all of a sudden they're pushed out. So they're not going to be till October 1st, but you've already built in an extra certain amount of percentage. And it's like, I think the big thing here is, we're slowly seeing copper and steel going up because of the tariffs, but there is so much more uncertainty with everybody because they don't know where the tariff rate's going to land. They don't understand what products might be hit, what countries are going to get the greatest tariffs. I mean, how do you plan for something like that?
Yeah, like we talked earlier, it just makes the whole uncertainty part of this makes the process longer. Oh, hold, I have to pause for a second. It's an earthquake. Yeah, just passed.
We might just keep that in because that's interesting. First time we've ever been recording and we had to pause because an earthquake was hitting Southern California.
There you go.
Yeah, because I mean, with this, we're seeing supply chain disruptions as well. I mean, one of them right now, I'm reading a report that says lead times for switchgear had doubled from 12 weeks to 26 weeks. And we knew during COVID that switchgear was even longer than 26 weeks. If it's 6 to 7 months, I mean, is that the real number to go off? Is 12? I mean, either way, you're looking at large delays on there. And I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I didn't even think of when we were talking with Travis was he was saying how contractors are now, they're not buying in phases anymore. So if a project's going to be over a 2 year period, like we got a school getting built right now, they have it planned out for 2 years. Obviously, if you're an electrician, you're coming in, you're doing your first phase, you're coming back after all the other trades come in, you're doing your second phase, all the other trades come in, you're doing your finishing work on the third. Well, guys are coming in and buying up that whole project at one time. And now they're either warehousing them themselves or they're warehousing them with their distributors. Well, now all that stock is off your shelves, which they have never planned for in the past because they weren't getting such big buyouts. So
Yeah,
now you get a couple projects at once and all those guys buy, your shelves are empty. And so now your lead time to get restocked for the next guys, that's even creating more shortages and less inventory available for a distributor to have on the shelf.
and think of it, just like you mentioned, if they're housing that product for at the distributor's location, they no longer have that space to
Mhm.
bring in pallets of new stuff to restock their shelves. So now they have less on the shelves, but still be a full warehouse.
Or if you're a contractor and before you've never done this, so you don't have any warehousing space yourself, you're having to go rent out some warehousing space to put all this in there. But if you're just a regular contractor now who's doing service and repair and you're walking in and Joe Schmo just bought up half the place and they're
Right.
shipping it over and you don't have the product you need there on your shelves, does that change the way that distributors start purchasing? Because now will distributors start purchasing excess stock in certain product groups so that they have an even more abundance for this new purchasing way of the contractor so that they're not losing anything and their shelves aren't bare? Does that change how a distributor goes to a manufacturer to purchase? And then, you add in now with the tariffs changing and depending on what country, now your price is fluctuating. So is it now becoming more, I mean, I feel like it always has been, but more of sort of like a stock market game where you're just trying to perfectly pinpoint that place where you're like, okay, it's dropped, it's at $5. This is perfect. Let's buy up a bunch of it now, ship it here. Where before it seemed like things were a little bit more steady, where you didn't need to make such bulk purchases because you don't know what's going to happen in a week.
Exactly. And you as a distributor, you always want, as a buyer from a distributor, you always want to be able to time that market because that's always what's going to make you profitable. But
Yeah.
you know, having to time it just so that way you don't lose money. That's the hard part for them. So yeah, because you don't want to be having too much product of one thing and not enough of another. And this is always going to be the scenario where a contractor comes in and you could have thought you have all the stuff you're looking for, and there's the one or two items you don't have. That now, even though you can deliver everything in a day or so, that other stuff is going to take, like you said, weeks and weeks and weeks out, and that just
Yeah.
puts a halt to the whole job anyway.
I mean, you were just talking about margins and everything. I mean, right now, nearly 70% of contractors report reduced profit margins due to unexpected material cost increases, which we can say is, with 80% certainty, that's probably because of the tariffs that are going on and the uncertainty people have with pricing. And I mean, Barney is one that just brought that up when we talked to him the other week. He was saying how he's winning jobs, but then when they go to purchase the materials, he's still getting a profit margin, but the profit margin isn't as much as what he initially thought it was going to be because the material pricing had increased. So that
Right.
was turning around and actually starting to pad a little bit more into his bids to basically safeguard against losing too much profit. And like he said, if it gets to a point where he puts a bid in today, they accept it in 2 months maybe, and then they don't start work for 6 months. Well, then if the profit margin's pretty much gone at that point, he has to go back to the GC and be like, listen, I can't do it at this price anymore.
Right.
Or, or he could be losing out on money. I mean, at this point, like his conversation said, making it a lot more difficult. He's having to stay in contact a lot more. He said he was prices on out bids he's already sent out with net pricer for materials every week that it's out there because he can see his updated pricing from his distributors where, he told us, or, he wasn't doing it that often because the price he got was the price that was probably going to be good for a longer amount of time. Now those prices aren't holding true for as long. He's having to keep an eye on bids that are out there to make sure that his profit margin isn't getting eaten away.
And that's an excellent point because we talk about contractors and so forth, but there's still, like you mentioned, a school system or something you're already being done. Schools, hospitals, municipalities, they have fixed contracts,
Yeah.
and so they've already negotiated a price for that for the year. And sure, there's a little bit of wiggle room in there, but it's normally a number that they both agreed on. Well,
Mhm.
well, now with the tariff thrown on top of there, who's picking that up?
Yeah. Like you said, it's already set. So where is that going to come in? Is his profit margin going to go down? Where can he make up for that? I mean, that's something we talked about before. Where can you make up for some of these increases to still stay competitive and keep your profit margin? Is it looking at labor savings products where we're seeing a lot more marketing from manufacturers from the top down trying to push their labor savings products to say, hey, this wiring device can save you a minute on every install. But when you're looking at a school where you're doing a couple thousand of those, that's a big save on labor that can make up for your margin that you had for your profit when it comes to your materials. Is it, now going back and sourcing from different manufacturers that you haven't used before because you're actually able to get their products at a a lower rate than the ones you're used to using? Um, or is it buying in bulk so you get a discounted price and then you're warehousing some of those products as well for future jobs? I mean, it seems like it's a changing ways. I don't know how else to better put it. And everything is getting sort of a little bit mixed up from everybody that we've talked to about this, that they're all having to adapt in different manners to adjust to this. And I think from what we've heard from people and people I've talked to off the podcast, it really just comes down to the uncertainty. They don't know exactly what's going to happen from day in and day out. You know,
Yeah, our chain, again, manufacturing distribution to the contractor, um, likes things to be stable. It allows them to, each of them to focus on a certain their own specialty, and then from that point allows them to, obviously complete the job. When you throw in the uncertainty that you mentioned, that just adds, 10 more layers to a chain that's been used to doing this way, for decades and decades.
yeah. And I mean, we've already, like, we talked with Barney in the past about profit margin and percentages, and we talked to Matt Firestone about that. And it just seems like going forwards, people are going to have to look a little bit more detailed. I mean, Nick said they do an after action report on every single project. They look at it from bid to completion, where they lost money, where they didn't expect it, where they've actually came out ahead. They dissect that. And it seems like one of the big adjustments that's going to have to be made with the fluctuating market costs is there's going to have to be um, a new way of looking at that, of looking at your past projects or where you came from and go, okay, our profit margin was, this certain percentage. Well, we might have to increase that by 1 or 2% in our new bids to make sure that, you know, we have enough room in there. So if they do come into place, we can sort of offset any additional material prices, but also not go above and beyond to where we're pricing ourselves out of the bid. Um, Another thing that I saw is that somebody had mentioned including clauses, in new bids that allow for price adjustments based off of tariff impacts. Wow, I'm doing terrible talking today. So, for example, escalation clauses tied to specific material price enticements that can help protect your margins. Um,
You know,
you know,
it's a good idea. It's just hard. It's going to be hard for general contractors, the owners of the buildings, to swallow, because you're saying, hey, here's the price, but it could increase,
yeah,
more. So, budget for that. If you're the owner budgeting for building this hospital, you can't say I'm going to plus or minus 25%. You
I
can't
mean,
do that.
25%. I mean, the tariffs in China at one point were 154%. So if you buzz it for 25%, all of a sudden, with China, we're not happy anymore. So we bump up the tariff again. Now you're at 100%. You know, I know they don't, it's not a direct reflection of 100% tariff is going to equal 100% increase on the product,
Right.
but there's going to be a larger increase than what you budget. And then think about being a GC. You're not only talking about electrical contractors. Now you got your plumbing guy. So if you put this in across everybody, how much more additional work is going on to them to be trying to adjust as you go? And like Barney says, a lot of his prices that he's getting and a lot of bids he's sending out, and even Travis mentioned about the prices they're sending from distributors, their amount of lead time of how good those prices are for, or for those, have substantially decreased. I mean, that seems like one of the biggest things in the first steps to say, hey, this price is used to be good for 21, 30 days. It's good for 14, you know,
Oh, good. It can even go to hours. Hey, this is only good for 8 hours.
which happened during COVID. I
Yeah,
think I
exactly.
told you before. I was out playing golf once with a guy that worked at a distributor that handled purchasing for them. And he was like, yeah, my purchasing bids for like copper are good for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
He's like, because it was changing so rapidly at that point. He was like, it started out, used to be 14 days, and now it went down to, half that time, and then half the time, and now we're down to hours because of such large fluctuations that they're giving you pricing.
Absolutely.
I mean, in the end, I think what I've come to see is The only thing and the only way to get through this is going to be obviously adjustment within companies themselves. Even Barney said it. They're looking at their own adjustments of what they can do. We've mentioned it a few times here, taking a look at your profit margins, taking a look at your completed jobs, going back to them and saying, okay, this is what our percentage was. This is what we should be adding in to stay competitive, but to also buffer ourselves. But I think the largest thing is relationships. I mean, it came from Travis, it came from Barney. The only way to get through this isn't by yourself, but is with the relationships of the people you're working with throughout the channel to get a clear understanding of what's coming, what's happening, what options you have, what you can do to offset. So it might be a distributor saying, hey, you should be looking at these products instead of this, or maybe purchasing this in bulk against this, or other creative ways, because I never heard about the warehousing until Travis brought it up. But are there other creative ways that contractors and distributors can be working through this, that even though nobody really knows what's happening, that they can throw it together and each be in a profitable place and maybe take a little bit off each shoulders where they're not so stressed out about it?
And on the contractor side, and Barney's even mentioned it. He's his people have always best specialized in a certain type of job because their guys are the best at doing that. Now he's bidding a little
Yeah.
bit for other jobs that he might have not done before. That
Yeah.
to get more work in the building. And even though, yeah, there's uncertainty as far as what the actual overall price will be at the end of it. And if he gets more jobs and his people are working and doing more stuff, that benefits him instead of the siloed. This is where my specialty is.
What?
And then the second part to that also is going a little bit farther outside of his range. Maybe he's used to being in one county, so to speak. Now
Yeah.
maybe going out a little bit farther for a job that he might have not done before. And again, just to keep his people busy.
Yeah, keeping your people busy, but also maybe, if you have more work going at one time, it allows you to have more buying power, which can also decrease the amount of cost of what you had. If you're going to different jobs that you haven't done before, it could open up to different products that you haven't used, which might open it up to more domestic products that you're not getting hit with tariffs on. Or, I guess it's sort of reimagine it depending on how it's affecting your business. Obviously, everybody is being affected differently. We're not sitting at everybody's computer or everybody's boardroom. We don't know how people are truly being affected because people's pricing is going to be different from distributors. Manufacturers are going about this differently. So the trickle down effect of those costs, we might not have seen them yet, you know, and I think that's one of the big issues right now. I think anybody that's telling you anything on the internet that's saying this is exactly what you should be doing or this is what's happening exactly, I think they're talking out their ass just a little bit because I don't think anybody really knows exactly how this is really unfolding at this time because we've talked with enough people. I've read into enough stuff that you don't really get direct answers. I mean, 3 minutes ago, it popped up on my computer that we're extending the Mexico tariffs for 90 days. I mean, if somebody was planning on bringing product in from Mexico and they're adjusting their pricing because they know their shipment's not going to be hitting the border until when those were supposed to be put into place, which is tomorrow, and now you got 90 more days. Well, now you don't have that tariff for 90 more days, and you were planning on the tariff hitting your shipment coming across the border tomorrow. It's not like they had 14 days. So now you're all whatever you planned for on adding that tariff to that load for your sales is now supposedly gone. Hopefully it's not still sitting there, but it's gone. But now you have to start planning that for 90 days out and anything else coming across the border from Mexico or China, wherever it may be that has their tariffs. Now you have to start planning, especially for Mexico, your next shipment's coming up because you probably have one for next week that you thought was going to be getting hit with a certain tariff that's not being hit anymore. So, um, you know,
You know, you mentioned in the beginning, we've talked to a tariff specialist, a
yeah,
guy who's an economist who actually does this every single day. We talked to a distributor who is having to see the tariff side from their point of view, and then down to the contractor who has to see it from their point of view. And out of all those conversations, that's the one thing that came out of it is that nobody knows.
yeah. I mean, nobody knows. I mean, it's the same thing when we went to NAD meetings and you talk to manufacturers. It, nobody knows. Like one of them was like, we got into a room and then we just said, well, we'll see what happens, because nobody knew what to plan for, what to do, or what to adjust, because there's so much uncertainty. You can't say we're going to go do route A, like Keith had said, where you bring it in maybe from a different country, or do this or do that. But then things are changing so rapidly that blows your plan out of the water. That I guess the whole wait and see bit is the only way to go right now. And then you adjust when it comes down to you. I mean, it really seems like it. I wish we were able to sit here and give more answers, or lay it out as, hey, this is the fix all, but it doesn't seem like anybody has that at this point. You're just going to have to deal with it on your own, in your own time, and figure it out, and how it's actually adjusting you, and how it's hitting you, and what's going to work best for you, because it seems like it's just completely an unknown that nobody can put their finger on at this point.
Agreed.
We'll leave it at that then. We don't know what we're talking about. Nobody knows what we're looking at. We wish you the best of luck with what you have to deal with. Hopefully, in some of our past conversations, it gave you some insights, but we really wish you the best. We hope you're able to figure this out. Drop us a comment with this and let us know if you're doing something you think others should be knowing about. But we really don't know what's going on. We're just trying to relay information that we heard and take our opinions and sort of give you something that's hopefully helpful. So that's what we got for you. Thanks for sticking with us. All right, Sal. I'll catch you next time.
We'll talk to you later.
Take care, everybody.